Part of being an artist, part of exploring the world as an artist, for me, means that I'm always visually aware of my surroundings, and I'm always looking for different things that I can use in my work. People are my subject matter. They're what I'm most interested in. The various faces and figures within my drawings are static representations of the human figure. So in a city like Charlotte, you'll find a lot of figurative sculptures in museums, monuments to famous people, and then there are other things that are figurative sculpture of a type. Department store mannequins, dolls, or puppets. They all seem to have an inner life of sorts that I'm trying to pull out of them by drawing and depicting them and putting them in different compositions. A very important part of my creative process is that I am a collector. I do walk around and pick things up off the street. Other things that would be regarded as garbage by folks, bits and pieces of scrap metal, plastic that would have fallen off a car or the side of a shopping cart. People give me things, but the found objects are always things that show the marks of some kind of history that is accumulated by other people having used them. And that's what really attracts me to those specific objects, with the idea that I will either draw them and put them into my compositions or literally attach them to the surface of my drawings. They are something for my different heads and figures to react against, and they also intrigue me because they seem to have a story that they want to tell. So I do physically collect things, but I'll photograph them, I'll sketch them, and then I will gather those images into a visual image archive. That can be both photographs that I keep on my computer, and it can also be sketches that I keep here in my studio. I have been an artist in residence here at the McCall Center for about a year now. I really wanted to invest deeply and see what the city had to offer. And of course, as regards figurative sculpture and found objects. I decided to go out for a walk, and I ended up at the Mint Museum. Museums for creative people can function as spaces to think. From the very beginning, I loved spending hours and hours and hours looking at, recording, and sketching and thinking about the different objects in them and how they got there in the first place, as well as what life they could take on if I sketched them and removed them from that environment and put them in one of my drawings. I started to spend a lot of time looking at initial sketches and reference photos to let ideas percolate. And I landed on something that had been, in the back of my mind for a while. As a newcomer to this local culture, I am often amazed at how interested people are in this city's namesake, and with that very specific character of Queen Charlotte. One piece that really struck me was a new acquisition piece by the artist Christina Cordova. The figures in it are life-size, maybe even a little bit larger than life-size, and they're arranged on the wall. When you view them, you're underneath and you're looking up at them. One female figure really stood out. She's so far above you that you're forced to look up at her. The more that I looked at this figure, the more I began to associate her with Queen Charlotte. And I think that's because of the qualities of the sculpture itself and because of how you encounter it as a viewer. She seems to look over and beyond you like a queen would her subjects. The best way to start describing my actual drawing process is to say that I work in layers. I will start by doing an underdrawing, coating that with a layer of different washes, and then drawing on top of that with other materials, and drawing on that and drawing on top of that. I like to show the history of the page developing into the final result. So the final drawings always look a little bit like they're in a state of emerging out of the page, and I really go for that look specifically. I wanted to bring in something about found objects into this museum-inspired piece. The most prominent thing about the figure is her huge billowing skirt. Initially, I was just going to draw it. And then I was like, you know, what if I didn't draw the skirt? What if I actually made it out of found material? What would that be? I started to look places where I could find discarded fabric. And I really liked the idea of cobbling it all together to make this patchwork giant skirt that would be supporting the figure. Another one that really stood out was a sculpture of what seems to be a group of people all hidden underneath a huge cloak. I was having a really hard time connecting my initial thoughts about this sculpture. Then came the idea of what's going to be peeking out from underneath the skirt. And one thing really set me off in that direction. It was one specific found object. It was a shoe that another artist in residence here at the McCall Center had given me. She actually found the shoe somewhere near the highway that runs by the McCall Center on a median. Somebody wore it for some reason, probably for a night on the town or something, we'll never know. What made this shoe special to me was that it was singular. And in that sense, it was functionless, right? I went to thrift stores in town and I started to ask, do you have any single shoes? Overwhelmingly, the other shoes that I found were men's black loafers. They paired really well with that crazy, eclectic high heel shoe. And I like the way that those shoes interact with the patchwork quilt skirt and the way that that kind of supports this regal figure above it. Now comes the part where I really start to finesse all those different components, play with little gradations of color, start to bring out different details in the drawing, start to sew the different pieces together, and play with the real intricacies of how these things are going to both visually and conceptually hold together. I try to keep that quality of open-mindedness to new things coming in and changing up the idea. From the very beginning to collecting material, looking at figurative sculptures and collecting found objects, to settling on something and deciding that I want that to be my specific subject matter, to the final stages of developing all those layers in the drawing. Hopefully, what it means in the end is that I make really complex, multi-layered, mysterious works of art that kept me engaged throughout the entire creative process and hopefully keep my viewers engaged as well. I never want anybody to look at my final work and just say, I got it. Rather, I'd like for them to kind of look at it and start to play with their own series of connections and kind of random associations in the way that I did to get to that final product myself.